The Concord spire drifted above a wide-ringed planet like a bright needle in the dark. Its silver halls were built for peace talks and public vows. Tonight, every screen in known space carried the same view. A long glass aisle, a high dais, and thousands of seats filled with visitors from far worlds. The air held a low hum of many languages, mixed with music that sounded calm but sharp, like it was trying to keep order. Queen Elena Carter stood at the center of it all. She wore a white cloak that fell straight to the floor, simple in shape, heavy in meaning. There were no heavy jewels on her neck, no crown of gold, laying a thin band of metal at her brow, plain enough to look like nothing, and strong enough to remind everyone who she was. She had ruled since she was young, and she had learned to show strength without shouting. At her right side stood Ethan Brooks. He looked like a man who belonged to a different kind of room, not a throne room, not a grand hall. It's more like a quiet place where people only spoke when they meant it. He wore a dark, formal coat, but his hands were marked by old work and old fights. At his hip hung a sword in a clean sheath. It was part of the rite, the old human right that said a protector must be ready even during celebration. The visitors in the seats watched him with open doubt. Elena had heard their doubts before the doors even opened. She had walked past groups who lowered their voices when she came near. Some spoke with care. Some did not bother. They did not question her power. They questioned his place beside her. To them, he was only the groom. To Elena, he was the man who had stepped between her people and disaster when others had stepped back. The ceremony began with a slow procession. Lights rose along the glass aisle like a line of stars. Drones hovered high and quiet, sending the image out to the whole galaxy. The Concord spire was not only a place, it was a stage, and every movement tonight was part of a message. A message Elena needed to send. Peace could not be begged for. It had to be built in front of everyone, with proof that it was real. The ceremonial master stood near the dais. He read out old words about unity and law. He spoke about the treaty that would bind many worlds into one shared order. He spoke about the wedding as a symbol that conflict could end. Most people listened with polite faces, but some did not. In a front row close to the dais sat a group of young women who held themselves like they owned the room. They wore bright silks that changed color under the lights. Their smiles were thin and sharp. When the master spoke of Ethan, their mouths tightened as if they had tasted something bitter. One of them leaned toward another and whispered, "It was not quiet enough." "So that is him," she said. "That is the human groom." The other woman gave a small laugh. A sword at his side. How sweet. Like a story for children. A third woman looked Ethan up and down, and then looked away, as if he did not matter. "He looks like a guard," she said, "not a man fit to stand with a queen." Their words carried through the still parts of the hall. Even if not everyone heard the exact lines, they heard the tone. But they heard the mockery. Elena's jaw set for a moment. Only a moment. Then it eased. She kept her eyes forward. She would not let anger take control of the message tonight. Ethan heard it too. He did not turn toward the voices. He did not flinch. He only breathed in once, slow and steady, and kept his posture straight. If he felt insult, he hid it behind discipline. Elena glanced at him from the corner of her eye. Their eyes met for a short moment, and something passed between them without words. "Endure," she seemed to say. He gave the smallest nod. The master asked the couple to step forward for the first rite, the joining of hands. Elena reached out. Ethan took her hand with care, not as a claim, but as a promise. His grip was warm and steady. The cameras caught the simple touch, and the whole galaxy saw it. Then the sharp voices rose again. One of the young women stood, not fully, but enough to be seen. "Is this proper?" she called out in a clear voice. A queen should not have to share a stage with a man who brings a blade like a threat. A low ripple ran through the seats. Some faces turned away, embarrassed. Others leaned in, hungry for trouble. The master hesitated. His eyes moved to Elena, asking for guidance. Elena did not look at the woman. She looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the watchers across space. Her voice stayed calm, but it carried. "The blade is not a threat," she said. "It is a reminder. Peace has to be guarded, even when it is new." The woman smiled as if she had won something anyway. "Let him guard you," she said, "if he can." More quiet laughter followed. Ethan's hand tightened once around Elena's, then relaxed. Still did not speak. Let the queen answer, because this was her hall and her moment. Yet his silence was not weakness. It was control. Lena knew control could be more frightening than anger. The master cleared his throat and continued, but the mood had changed. The hall felt less like a wedding and more like a test. When the first rite ended, the master raised his hands. By ancient custom of the Concord Spire, he announced, a union that binds many worlds may be asked to prove its honor before witnesses. Elena already knew this was coming. The request had been pushed through earlier, wrapped in polite words. She had allowed it because refusing would look like fear, and fear would invite more attacks later. The master turned toward Ethan. Ethan Brooks, human groomed Queen Elena Carter. Do you accept the trial of honor as demanded by those who question this union? The hall waited. Ethan finally spoke. His voice was clear and even, simple and firm. He accepts, he said. Not loud, not dramatic, but strong enough to cut through the whispers. Elena felt the crowd's attention lock onto him. A man who had been treated like a decoration had just claimed the center without raising his voice. The young women in bright silks smiled again, pleased, as if the trap had closed. Elena did not smile. She watched Ethan's calm face and saw something the mockers could not see. He was not walking into a game. He was walking into a line he would not step back from. The hall did not relax after Ethan accepted the trial. If anything, it grew tighter, like a rope pulled too hard. The ceremonial master stepped back, and a group of officials moved forward with tablets and sealed folders. They spoke with trained smiles, but their eyes watched for a mistake. Queen Elena stayed still beside Ethan. Her hand rested at her side now, but her shoulders remained squared. She knew these trials were not only old custom, they were tools, were made long ago to shame rivals without starting open war. Ethan stood with calm posture. He looked down the long aisle once, then up at the many rows of faces. The screens above showed him from every angle. Across the galaxy, people leaned closer to their own screens, waiting to see if the human groom would break. A woman in a gray, formal suit stepped forward. Her badge read Claire Dawson. She spoke in clear basic trade language so no one could pretend they did not understand. The trial of honor will be 3 parts, Claire said. First, the questions of duty. Second, the measure of strength. 8. Third, a formal duel to settle any final doubt. A low sound moved through the crowd, half approval and half hunger. Some wanted justice, wanted blood, most wanted a story to repeat later. Elena's advisor, Nora Blake, leaned close to the queen. They pushed hard for the duel, Nora said under her breath. Too hard. Elena's eyes did not move. I know, she replied. Watch everything. Claire turned to Ethan. Do you agree to these terms? Ethan answered in the same even voice as before. Yes. The first part began at once. A narrow platform rose from the floor with a single chair and a bright light above it. It looked less like a rite and more like an interrogation room dressed in clean colors. Claire held up her tablet. Ethan Brooks, you are asked to show your value. Why should the galaxy accept you beside Queen Elena? Some people in the front rows leaned in. The young women in bright silks looked pleased, as if the question alone was a win. Ethan did not sit. He remained standing. Because I will do my duty, he said. I will protect her life, will protect her people. I will not use her power for my pride. Claire's lips pressed together. You speak of protection, she said. Do you believe the queen needs a guard to rule? It was a trap. If he said yes, he would insult her strength. If he said no, he would call himself useless. Elena watched him closely. Her face stayed calm, but inside she measured the danger. A wrong answer could be turned into a reason to tear the treaty apart. Ethan looked at the questioner, then toward Elena for one brief moment. He did not ask for help. He only made sure his words would not harm her. A strong ruler does not need a guard to rule, he said. But a ruler still needs a defender when others break the law. Not because she is weak, because enemies are dishonest. A few quiet murmurs rose. Some faces changed, not with love, but with respect. He had not been pulled into the trap. Claire shifted to the next question, faster now. If the queen orders you to strike first in a conflict, will you obey? Ethan did not answer quickly. He let the pause sit in the air. It was not fear, it was care. "I will obey lawful orders," he said. "If an order breaks our treaty, I will warn her. She still insists I will not become a weapon for a crime." The hall went even quieter. Refusing a ruler in public was risky. But saying he would obey any order would have made him sound like a tool. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thought. He had just promised the galaxy that he would not help her cheat. That promise made her look stronger, not weaker. Claire asked more questions. Each one tried to paint Ethan as either a savage or a servant. Each time he answered with plain truth and careful balance. He did not boast. He did not beg. He did not give the crowd easy drama. When the questions ended, some people looked disappointed. They had wanted him to stumble. Instead, he had made the room feel a little more honest, and honesty made trouble harder. The second part of the trial began. Officials rolled out a set of measuring frames, weight bars, and pressure plates. The equipment looked new, clean, and official. It also looked wrong. Nora Blake's eyes sharpened. She leaned to Elena again. "Those settings," she whispered. "They are tuned for larger bodies. The numbers will make him look weak." Elena's fingers curled once, then loosened. She could not accuse the officials without proof, not in front of the galaxy. Ethan stepped forward to the pressure plate. Claire watched him with a careful smile. "Show your strength," she said. He placed his boots on the plate and pushed. The display flashed a number. It looked low. A soft laugh rose from the same row of bright silks. Ethan did not react. He looked at the display, then at the side panel, where the calibration markings were set. He spoke without anger. "This scale is set to a different baseline," he said. "It is not measuring human weight and force correctly." Claire blinked as if surprised. "Do you claim the equipment is wrong?" "I claim the settings are not neutral," Ethan replied. "If this is a fair trial, correct it." The words landed hard. Fair trial. Neutral. The Concord Spire was built on those promises. Claire turned to the officials. One of them hesitated, then adjusted the settings. The display changed. The baseline dropped to match human standards. Ethan repeated the test. The number rose to a proper level. Not superhuman, not impossible, just real. The laughter stopped. The officials moved him through more tests. Grip, balance, speed. Each time, Ethan performed with quiet skill. He did not try to impress. He only tried to be accurate. That made the results harder to argue with. When the second part ended, the hall felt unsettled. The crowd had come to watch a human fail. Instead, they had watched him refuse to be cheated. Claire took a breath. "The third part," she said, "will settle what talk and numbers cannot." 2 guards opened a side door. A tall man walked in wearing formal combat gear with smooth plates that caught the light. In his hands was a weapon shaped like a spear humming with contained power. The young women in bright silks leaned back with satisfied faces. Elena's heart did not show on her face, but it clenched inside her chest. A dual champion was meant to be skilled, but this looked like more than skill. It looked like a public killing wrapped in ceremony. Ethan watched the man enter. He did not step away. His hand rested near his sword, not gripping it, just near it. Claire spoke the words that made the room hold its breath. "Ethan Brooks will face the champion. Duel will be observed and recorded. It will end when one fighter yields, is disarmed, or cannot continue." Elena turned slightly toward Ethan. Her voice was low enough that only he could hear. "This is not a game," she said. Ethan's eyes stayed forward. "He knows," he answered, using the same formal way of speaking as before. It sounded simple, but there was steel under it. He took one step forward and spoke so the hall could hear. "He requests one condition," Ethan said. "The duel must be broadcast without delay and without edits. No private channels, no closed angles." A ripple went through the seats. Some officials looked uneasy. Claire's gaze sharpened. "Why?" "Because truth should not need hiding," Ethan said. For a moment, Claire did not respond. Then she nodded once, stiffly, accepted. The champion lifted his humming weapon and pointed it toward the center floor. The dual space lights brightened. A low tone sounded, signaling the start. Ethan placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. The whole galaxy watched as the human Groom prepared to draw steel under the cold lights of the Concord spire. The dual space was a wide circle of dark glass set into the floor. A thin line of light marked its edge. Above it, cameras floated in silent rows, turning like careful eyes. The air smelled clean, like metal and cold power. Every seat in the hall faced the circle, and every screen in the galaxy showed the same view. Ethan stepped into the circle first. He moved with simple steps, not rushed and not slow. His face held no smile. His shoulders were loose, ready to move. He drew his sword in one smooth motion. The steel did not glow. It did not hum. It was plain and bright under the lights. Some in the crowd snickered at the sight of it. Few even shook their heads as if they already knew the ending. Queen Alina stood just outside the circle, hands folded in front of her. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes did not leave Ethan. Nora Blake stood near her, watching the officials more than the fighters. The champion entered next. He was tall and broad, wrapped in sleek armor that fit like a second skin. The plates carried faint lines of light, like a net of hidden power. In his hands was the humming spear. He spun it once, a show of skill meant to impress the crowd and unsettle his opponent. The ceremonial master raised his hand. "Begin," he said. The champion moved first, fast. He dashed across the circle with a sudden burst, spear aimed at Ethan's chest. The spear tip left a thin trail of light in the air. Some people gasped. Ethan did not jump back in panic. He shifted to the side and let the spear pass close enough to feel the heat. He rotated his body and brought his sword up, not to strike, but to guide the spear away.
Ow.
The move was small and exact. Champion turned and attacked again, harder. He struck in quick patterns, pushing Ethan toward the edge. Each time, Ethan used footwork instead of brute force. He kept the blade between them, always at the best angle, gave ground without looking scared. To some watchers, it looked like retreat. The women in bright silks smiled as if they were watching a weak man being pushed into place. But Elena's eyes narrowed. She saw Ethan's feet. He was not being cornered. He was measuring distance. He was learning timing. He was letting the champion spend energy. The champion tried to end it with a heavy thrust. The spear drove forward with a loud crack of air. Ethan dropped low, rolled to the side, and rose behind the champion's shoulder. In the same motion, he tapped the spear shaft with his blade. The champion's grip loosened for a single moment. Ethan used that moment. He hooked the sword against the spear and twisted. The spear flew from the champion's hands and skidded across the glass floor, spinning until it stopped at the far edge of the circle. The hall fell silent for a beat, as if the crowd could not accept what it had seen. The duel rules were clear. Disarmed meant the fight should end. Ethan stepped back and lowered his sword slightly, offering a chance to yield. He did not raise his blade for a killing strike. He did not show off. He simply waited. The champion stood still, breathing hard. Then his helmet turned toward the officials, and his left hand moved near his wrist as if touching a control. Nora Blake's voice came sharp and low. "No. That is not a surrender signal," she said. Elena's fingers tightened. "No," she replied. The champion's armor lines brightened. High wine rose in the air, thin and dangerous. Ethan's eyes flicked to the glowing seams, and his stance changed at once. His sword came up, ready for something not written in any duel script. Then the attack happened. It was not aimed at Ethan. A burst of raw energy shot from the champion's armor, not as a strike toward the opponent, but as a wide sweep toward the edge of the circle where Alina stood. The beam was fast and silent, like light itself, meant to cut through flesh before anyone could move. The crowd did not even have time to scream. He did not think in words. He did not hesitate. His body reacted before fear could catch up. He sprinted toward Alina, crossing the circle in a straight line. The energy burst reached him as he reached the edge. He raised his sword with both hands. Steel met the energy in a clean angle, like a mirror catching the sun. For a split second, the blade looked black against the white glare. The beam split, not into pieces, but into two paths that slid along the blade's line. One path shot up into the ceiling shields, the other slammed into the floor and ran along the circle's light border, burning a bright scar into the glass. The shields overhead flared. Warning lights blinked, but the station did not fail. The beam did not hit Alina. Ethan's knees bent under the force. His boots scraped the floor. He held the angle until the burst ended, then lowered the sword as the air returned to normal. Alina stood behind him, alive. For a long moment, no one in the hall spoke. The silence was deep enough to feel heavy. The broadcast drones hovered, capturing everything. No one could deny what had just happened. No one could say it was a misunderstanding. The duel had turned into an attempt to kill a human queen on a neutral floor. The champion staggered, as if surprised the plan had failed. His helmet turned from Alina to Ethan. The glowing lines on his armor flickered again, preparing another burst. Ethan's voice cut through the quiet. It was not loud, but it was clear. "Stop," he said. The champion did not stop. Ethan moved with sudden speed, closing the distance before the armor could fire. He struck the champion's forearm with the flat of his blade, hard enough to break grip and disrupt the control. The champion's hand jerked away from the wrist device. Ethan followed with a second strike to the shoulder joint. The armor plate cracked. The glowing lines dimmed. The champion fell to one knee. Ethan placed the point of his sword an inch from the champion's throat, not touching skin. His eyes were steady. His breathing was controlled. "Yield," Ethan said. This time, the champion raised both hands, palms out. The ceremonial master looked frozen. Claire Dawson's face had gone pale. Officials stared at their tablets, as if they could rewrite the moment by reading it differently. Alina stepped forward, her cloak brushing the scorched edge of the circle. She looked at the champion, then at the officials, then at the crowd. Her voice was calm, but it carried like a bell. "This was not a duel," she said. "This was an attack." Ethan lowered his sword and stepped away from the kneeling man, but he did not sheath it. He kept it in hand, not as a threat, but as a warning that he would not be fooled twice. The hall remained silent. Across the galaxy, billions watched the same truth at the same time, and the story of the human groom changed in one breath from joke to shield. Ethan turned slightly toward the ceremonial master. "He asks for the right to speak under the Concord laws," he said. The request was simple. The meaning behind it was not. The entire station seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether law would stand or whether power would try to laugh again. The ceremonial master stood stiff, like his body had forgotten how to move. He looked from Ethan's drawn sword to the scorched line on the floor, then to Queen Elena's calm face. The hall was still silent, but it was not peaceful silence. It was the silence that comes before a storm. Claire Dawson stepped forward, forcing her voice to sound steady. "The duel is over," she said. "The champion has yielded." Ethan did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the officials near the control panels. He had seen the champion touch his wrist. He had seen the armor lines light up in a pattern that was not part of any normal duel. He lifted his sword slightly, not toward anyone's throat, but upward, so the cameras could see the blade in his empty left hand. "He requests the right to speak under Concord law," Ethan said again. The ceremonial master swallowed. His gaze went to a screen near the dais, where the Concord Spire's rules scrolled in clean lines. Those rules were older than most governments. They were the reason people came here to settle disputes without war. At last, the master nodded. "It is granted," he said, voice dry. The floor recognizes Ethan Brooks as defender and witness. A ripple moved through the crowd. People shifted in their seats. Some leaned forward. Some leaned back. Many looked uneasy because they understood what came next. A defender's request was not a speech for pride. It was a legal trigger. Ethan stepped to the center of the circle, careful not to put his back to anyone. The sword point lowered to the floor, resting lightly against the glass. It was not a threat. It was a sign. He spoke in simple words, so even those who disliked humans could not twist meaning. "This station is neutral ground," Ethan said. "The duel was allowed because it was called a trial. But the trial was used to hide an attack on Queen Elena." He paused and looked up at the floating cameras. The galaxy saw it. No one can say it was private. Claire's jaw tightened. "Do you accuse the Concord Spire of wrongdoing?" she asked quickly. Ethan shook his head once. "No. He accuses those who planned it and those who helped it happen." The hall stayed quiet, but the quiet changed. It became focused. People were no longer waiting for a joke. They were waiting for names, proof, and consequences. Ethan continued. The champion was disarmed. Then his armor fired toward the queen. That was not a mistaken movement. That was a deliberate action. He turned his head slightly toward the officials, scanning faces. The equipment in the strength test was set wrong. Questions were designed to trap. The dual rules were used as cover. Nora Blake stepped closer to Alina and spoke low. "He is building the full chain," she said. "He is not letting them cut it into pieces." Elena's eyes stayed on Ethan. She understood the risk. A strong statement could force war. A weak statement could invite more attacks. Ethan's words had to be sharp enough to cut lies, but clean enough to avoid blame without proof. Ethan lifted his chin. Concord law says if neutrality is violated, a defender can demand a binding review. He demands that review now. The ceremonial master blinked, then looked toward the upper control balcony. A set of lights along the walls shifted from warm gold to cold white. A low tone sounded deeper than the dual start signal. It was the station's tribunal alert. In the crowd, a few visitors stood, startled. Others reached for devices, trying to send messages. Then their screens flickered, and the station's network locked into tribunal mode. Only official channels stayed open. Claire's face changed. She no longer looked like a smooth host. She looked like someone who had just lost control of a room. "Alina Carter, the ceremonial master," said, voice echoing. "Do you confirm the defender's claim?" Alina stepped forward. Her cloak brushed the burned glass. She spoke without heat. Her words were calm, but they hit like stone. "I confirm," Alina said. "Someone tried to kill a human queen on neutral ground. The broadcast shows it. The scorch marks show it. My life was the target." She lifted her hand slightly. "Humanity will not answer this with blind violence. But humanity will not ignore it." Ethan's eyes softened for a moment when he heard her say humanity, not just herself. She was not making it personal. She was making it lawful. Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked toward the front row where the bright silk women sat. Their smiles were gone. They were watching the tribunal lights with stiff faces. One of them rose halfway, trying to speak over the silence. "This is theater," she said. "A human with a sword wants attention. The queen uses it to gain sympathy." Ethan turned his head slowly toward her. His face stayed calm, but his eyes were flat, like a winter lake. "He does not want sympathy," Ethan said. "He wants the truth recorded and judged." The woman's lips curled. "A groom is nothing," she said. "A queen is power. He is only a man." Ethan took one step forward, blade still pointed down. "He is only a man," he agreed. "That is why this matters. If even an ordinary human man can see the trap and stop it, then the trap was not subtle. It was arrogant." A small sound escaped the crowd, not laughter. It was a nervous breath. The tribunal system projected lines of text across the air above the dais. Evidence request. Broadcast lock. Witness recall. Chain of command. The station was now a machine for law, not celebration. Guards moved to surround the kneeling champion. When they grabbed his arms, he did not fight. His helmet tilted down like he knew he was finished. Nora Blake spoke to Alina again, very low. "They will try to trade him as a lone actor," she said. Alina answered just as low. "Then we forced him to explain the risk control, the armor settings, the rig tests." Ethan heard enough to understand the plan. He raised his voice again, speaking to the hall and the cameras. "He calls for full review of dual equipment," Ethan said. "He calls for audit of the strength test settings. He calls for custody of all control logs from today." Claire stiffened. "Those records are protected." The ceremonial master looked at the tribunal projection, then at Claire. "In tribunal mode, no record is protected from review," he said. Claire's eyes flicked to the balcony again, searching for support. None came. The cold white lights held steady. The hall felt different now. Not like a wedding, not like a duel, like a court. Queen Alina stepped beside Ethan, not behind him, and not in front. Side by side, they faced the crowd. Ethan's sword remained in his hand, lowered and still. Yet the whole galaxy understood why the room had gone silent. Not because a man threatened to kill, because a man had forced the truth into the open, and now no one could laugh their way out of it. Tribunal mode changed the Concord Spire in ways that even the crowd could feel. Doors that had stood open for ceremony slid shut with quiet locks. Hall lights stayed cold white. Every screen, from the ceiling panels to the smallest wrist display, showed the same message: neutral review and progress. All parties held to Concord law. Queen Alina and Ethan were moved to a protected dais room made of clear wall panels and shielded air. It was not a prison. It was a safety chamber, meant to keep witnesses alive while truth was sorted. Nora Blake stayed close, speaking to officials through a sealed channel. Claire Dawson stood outside the chamber with a group of judges and record keepers. Her face was tight, but she did her job. The tribunal did not need her to like the process. It only needed her to follow it. Ethan sat with his sword across his knees, still sheathed now. He did not look proud. He looked alert, as if danger could return at any second. Lena watched him for a long time, then spoke softly. "You saved my life," she said. Ethan kept his eyes on the chamber door. "He did his duty," he replied. Alina let out a slow breath. "You did more than duty," she said. "You made it impossible for them to hide." Outside, the tribunal moved fast. The broadcast had captured the energy burst, but the tribunal needed a chain that led to planners. It began with simple facts. The champion's armor was removed piece by piece. Inside, the wrist device was found wired into the suit controls. The logs showed a command not tied to dual movement. It was a firing order. It had been set to sweep toward a fixed location near the Queen's standing point. Then came the equipment review. Strength test frame was checked. The calibration baseline was found altered. The changes were not a random error. They matched a known profile used to make humans score low. Then came the dual approval trail. Forms were pulled, signatures were compared. Claire Dawson's approval stamp was present, but it sat on top of an earlier request that had been changed. Someone had edited it after it reached her desk. The tribunal pulled station access records and found a small group had entered the systems room the night before the wedding. They had used temporary passes that should never have reached them. None of these facts needed a loud speech. They spoke for themselves. Words spread through the hall, then through orbit, then through the galaxy. Even worlds that disliked humans could not deny what they saw. The attack had been planned. It had been wrapped in ceremony. It had failed only because Ethan moved faster than a beam meant to kill. In orbit around the ringed planet, ships held position. Some turned weapons away from the station, showing they would not join any fight. Others backed off, not wanting to be linked to the plot. Trade channels began to freeze. Diplomatic offices sent quiet alerts. Simple truth moved like fire. Anyone tied to the attempt would be cut out. After several hours, the ceremonial master returned to the public hall. He stood beneath the tribunal projection and spoke to the cameras with a voice that sounded older than before. "The tribunal issues an interim ruling," he announced. "The attack on neutral ground is confirmed. Diplomatic immunity is suspended for those tied to the plot. The Concord Spire orders the surrender of the planners, the handlers, and all data linked to the attempt." A wave of sound rose from the crowd, part shock and part relief. In the protected dais room, Alina listened through the speaker grid. Nora Blake nodded once, as if checking a box in her mind. Ethan did not move. Alina looked at him. "They will come for you in words," she said. "They will say you forced the tribunal to punish them. They will say you wanted a stage." Ethan finally turned his head to face her. "Let them talk," he said. "The broadcast is louder than their talk." The tribunal called the next witnesses. Claire Dawson testified, short and careful. She admitted the paperwork trail had been altered. She also admitted she had seen the wrong calibration, but did not stop the trial, because the pressure from powerful guests was heavy. The tribunal did not excuse her. It also did not treat her as the planner. She was fined and removed from her post, but she was not the hand that aimed the beam. The champion was questioned next. Under tribunal oath, he broke. He admitted he had been promised safety and reward if he followed the plan. He had been told the energy burst would be blamed on a dual accident. He had been told the station logs would be cleaned. He named the handlers who gave him the wrist device. He named the officials who helped them gain access. He pointed not with words alone, but with files and code keys they had given him. The tribunal ordered arrests inside the station. Guards moved with firm steps. Several officials were taken from control rooms and private suites. Their faces showed the same shock. They had believed the station would protect them from consequence. Now it would not. When the tribunal finished the interim process, the ceremonial master gave the next announcement. The wedding rites may continue, he said, if Queen Elena Carter chooses. Under tribunal protection, the Concord Spire will hold the vow and record it as a lawful act. Elena stood in the protected room, considering the hall wanted a finish. The galaxy wanted a symbol. But Elena did not want a symbol built on fear. She looked at Ethan. "Do you still want this?" She asked him, plain and direct. Ethan answered without hesitation. "Not to prove anything. To keep the treaty alive." Elena nodded. "Then we do it our way," she said. They returned to the hall under guard, walking the same glass aisle. The scorched scar still marked the dual circle, left uncleaned on purpose. It was evidence, and it was a warning. The crowd stood as they passed. No one laughed now. Even those who hated humans stayed silent, because silence was safer than mockery when truth was watching. At the dais, Elena faced the cameras. She spoke first. "This vow is not a show," Elena said. "It is a promise that law will stand when power tries to cheat. It is a promise that no one will use ceremony as a weapon." She took Ethan's hand. "Ethan Brooks stands here because he chose restraint, until restraint was no longer safe. He drew his blade to block murder, not to chase glory." Ethan looked across the hall. His voice was steady. "He vows to protect this peace," he said. "He vows to speak truth even when it is costly. He vows to stand between harm and the people who cannot block it." The ceremonial master completed the rite. The treaty seals were confirmed. The union was recorded and broadcast. When the final words ended, the hall did not erupt into loud cheers. It did something stronger. It held a respectful quiet, then offered a measured salute, world by world, screen by screen. Later, away from the cameras, Elena and Ethan stood by a wide window that showed the ringed planet below. Ships in orbit were already moving into new patterns, not for war, but for enforcement. Trade lanes shifted. Messages arrived from distant worlds asking to join the treaty under the new proven rules. Nora Blake entered with a small datapad. "Quests are coming in," she said. "They want the Concord Spire standards written into new agreements. They saw what happened today, and they want that kind of law." Elena took the pad, then looked at Ethan. "They mocked you," she said, "and you answered without cruelty." Ethan watched the planet's rings turn slow and bright. "He did not silence them with fear," he said. "He silenced them with proof." Elena nodded. "Then we keep building," she said. And across the galaxy, the story spread. Not as a joke about a human groom, but as a warning and a hope. When power hid behind ceremony, a simple human blade and a steady human will forced the truth into the light.